Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us at the BEAD Challenge process. We're going to be providing an overview and readiness guide for our tribes, our local governments, nonprofits, and ISPs in the Central Coast. My name is Tara Garaya. I'm the President and CEO of the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, and I thank you for joining us today to have a very important conversation and see how we can partner to really make sure that our voice is heard in the Monterey Bay region, and we are truly represented in this information and the data as we leverage resources. I am joined today by Maura Gildea, who's our Manager of Economic Development and Digital Equity, and David Witkowski, our Senior Advisor on Broadband. And briefly, just in terms of the agenda, on the next slide, just want to give you a run through of that. While we are reviewing the agenda, please do in the chat note your name in terms of an introduction. I think it'd be great to see who all has joined us. Let us know who you are, what do you represent, which county out of our great Monterey Bay region where you're located, and what you're representing would be super helpful. Please do hold your Q&A until the conclusion of the webinar. You're welcome to post in our Q&A box directly. There's a Q&A link at the bottom of your Zoom where you can enter your questions, and staff will monitor and address that at the end of the webinar. Briefly on the agenda, we'll provide an overview of the BEAD program, understanding the BEAD challenge process, the steps to submit the challenge, and how can the Central Coast Broadband Consortia and the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership support you in making sure that challenge is submitted, and of course, any Q&A that you may have. And on the next slide, just briefly, to share with you, the Monterey Bay Economic Partnership is the region's excuse me, regional convener in economic development with the vision of a thriving region for all. That said, we envision that through economic workforce development, trying to retain businesses and industry for high quality, high paying jobs, housing across all sectors, that's our, at all levels, intersecting with policy, sustainability, education, transportation. And of course, one of our larger initiatives is certainly broadband. How do we bridge the digital divide in our region? And to that end, I will now kick it over to Maura, who is our manager on all things broadband and digital equity. Enjoy.
Thank you for that introduction, Tara. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming. I am MVEP's Manager of Economic Development and Digital Equity. So I'll just kick it off by giving a brief overview of the BEAD program. So what is BEAD? BEAD stands for the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program. The BEAD program was created by the Investment, Infrastructure, and Jobs Act in 2021, and it was designed to significantly expand broadband internet access across the United States. The program allocates $42.5 billion nationwide with a focus on achieving 3 core objectives. These include developing broadband access plans, building infrastructure, and supporting the adoption of new networks. And in order to achieve these objectives, funds will be used in several critical areas. These include first, constructing broadband networks to ensure that underserved and unserved areas receive high-speed, reliable internet service. Second, establishing subsidies for internet service to make it more affordable for all, particularly for those in low-income households. And third, advancing the adoption of broadband by providing devices and training programs, which ensures that people not only have access to the internet, but also the necessary tools and skills to use it effectively. So in short, BEAD aims to address both the infrastructure and the affordability aspects of broadband access to ensure a more comprehensive digital inclusion. So how is BEAD different from other programs that we have? So some of you may be familiar with several broadband related programs that are currently in their award or development process. While each ultimately serves this end goal of ensuring 100% broadband coverage for all Californians, these programs do differ in their purpose, their focus, and funding sources. So the BEAD program, as I just mentioned, is a federally funded program that aims to deploy last mile infrastructure to directly connect broadband services to end users. And it prioritizes unserved and underserved areas that have the highest need for broadband access. The next two, the Last Mile Federal Funding Account, or the FFA, and the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative are both state programs enacted under Senate Bill 156, which was also signed into law in 2021. And this was a pretty historic piece of legislation as well, as it originally allocated $6 billion for providing equitable access to broadband services statewide, $2 billion of which was originally slated for last mile projects. Similar to BEAD, the FFA targets last mile, which is a challenging and costly part of broadband deployment, which is addressing the gaps in this final leg of the network that connects service providers to consumers. On the other hand, the Middle Mile Broadband Initiative, its purpose is to build this backbone infrastructure that connects this major network, these major network hubs, and supports multiple providers and last mile connections. And they recently just released an updated Middle Mile Broadband map. I would highly encourage everyone to check that out. And finally, we have the California Advanced Services Fund Infrastructure Grant Account, which is a state-funded program that provides grants and loans for both last and middle mile infrastructure projects throughout the state. So the BEAD program is still moving along and is relatively early in its development. Deployment of the middle mile is in the pre-installation phases and installation process. FFA funding has recently begun to roll out, and CASIF infrastructure awards for our region have been dispersed since February with our partners like Cruiseo, SurfNet, and LCB Communications. And as I'll discuss in the next few slides, the BEAD process is pretty far from these award and implementation phases, but it does hold great potential for improving broadband access in our region. So who can receive BEAD funding? BEAD funding is distributed by the NTIA, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, to all 50 states and US territories. In California, the California Public Utilities Commission is responsible for implementing the BEAD program, and our state has been allocated $1.86 billion. Based on our share of unserved and underserved locations. And these funds will be dispersed to subgrantees based on the Federal Communications Commission's broadband coverage map. And these subgrantees can include a variety of entities like local governments, tribal nations, nonprofits, and internet service providers. And the highest priority for funding will be given to projects that meet specific criteria. So first up are projects that connect fiber directly to users, and fiber optic connections are considered to offer the highest speeds and reliability, but it should be noted that this is definitely not like a one size fits all. Second are projects that connect unserved locations, and these are areas that currently lack adequate broadband service. Third are projects that improve affordability, which is really important for making sure that all residents, regardless of their income level, can access and benefit from high-speed internet. So we'll now take a look at the NTIA's estimated timeline for the BEAD program, which outlines some key milestones from planning to implementation. So in 2022, the NTIA began distributing planning funds to states. And this phase involves states developing their initial broadband action plans and preparing to identify priority areas for funding. In 2023, states started submitting their broadband action plans to the NTIA. And this year was also pretty important because we're finally beginning to see the start of true stakeholder engagement and public comment periods to ensure that community input is considered. In 2024, the NTIA has started to approve state action plans, and the CPUC will start the application process for subgrantees after that. And then afterwards, in 2025, funds will be awarded to selected subgrantees, and projects will start. And in 2026 and beyond, the CPUC will continue to monitor and evaluate these funded projects to make sure that they meet the program's goals. But throughout all of this, ongoing community engagement and feedback is very important for adapting and refining projects to effectively meet local needs. And one such example of this is where we're at now on the timeline, which is the BEAD challenge process. So what is the challenge process? It's a critical step in determining which locations and community anchor institutions in the state are eligible for BEAD funding. The challenge process is designed to verify and update the service status locations on the FCC's broadband coverage map, which ensures that funding is directed to areas that truly need it. So the challenge process began on July 8th. It's a 30-day challenge phase, and during this period, eligible challengers, including local governments, ISPs, nonprofits, and tribal nations, can submit evidence to change the service status of any individual or group location on the FCC's broadband coverage map. So really this just means challengers can determine which locations are considered served, underserved, or served. And BEAD funding will prioritize first unserved locations. These are areas that lack access to reliable service at speeds of at least 25 by 3 megabits per second. The primary goal here is to ensure that these locations are connected first. And second are underserved locations. And these are areas that lack access to reliable service speeds of at least 100 by 20 megabits per second. But successfully challenging and updating the map can really direct BEAD funds to areas that need them the most, making sure that these unserved and underserved communities receive the infrastructure and the support they need to achieve digital equity. And this process is just a really important mechanism for refining the allocation of federal funds and making sure that the most accurate and up-to-date information guides our statewide efforts to expand access. So who can participate? The following entities are eligible to submit challenges to the FCC's coverage maps. These include local governments, tribal nations, nonprofit organizations, and ISPs. While individual residents aren't able to submit challenges directly, they do play a very important role in this process. Residents can upload evidence of their service status, such as speed test results or service availability reports, which eligible challengers can then submit on their behalf. And this kind of collaborative approach helps make sure that the most accurate and comprehensive data is available for the challenge process, especially since it's pretty unlikely that any of these eligible challengers will be able to verify the service status of each individual location and address on these maps. So why is the challenge process important? For many reasons. One is that it allows stakeholders, including the entities I just described, to participate in verifying the validity of the data that the FCC has released. Community involvement ensures that those who know their communities best have a voice in the process. Another is that it prevents the misrepresentation of data regarding locations that do need funding. Incorrect or outdated data can lead to resources being allocated to areas that don't need them, while those that do may get overlooked. Additionally, the challenge process helps determine which locations are eligible, and correcting any inaccuracies on the map really makes sure that the funds are directed to truly unserved and underserved areas. And ensuring the most accurate and fair broadband mapping is really essential for equitable resource distribution. And accurate maps are very important to effectively plan and implement these broadband projects and make sure that every community gets the connectivity that they need. And lastly, the challenge process empowers communities to advocate for their needs. It gives local stakeholders the tools and the mechanisms to highlight areas lacking sufficient broadband access and make sure that these state and federal programs address these gaps the most effectively. So let's go over the type of challenges that can be submitted during the challenge process. Challengers can provide evidence that a location is unserved, and this determination can be based on factors like whether or not broadband service is available at a location, if the service meets the minimum speed requirements, if the service latency is within acceptable limits, if the location is only served by business grade services, if there are data caps, and what type of technology is used to provide service. Another type of challenge is identifying a location as a community anchor institution, and these are places like schools, libraries, and healthcare facilities, which are all eligible for BEAD funding. Another type of challenge is whether a location already has a federal, state, or local enforceable commitment for broadband service. It needs to be identified so that BEAD funds aren't allocated redundantly. And pretty similarly, if an ISP is currently building out broadband to challenge locations, it should be documented so it prevents duplication of funding. And then the next two are related to areas and MDUs. So challenges can be submitted if there are 6 or more locations using the same technology and are served by one provider, which really helps with identifying service issues within specific areas. And a challenge can be submitted for a multi-dwelling unit to address connectivity issues unique to these places. So here is a timeline, another timeline of the challenge process. So right now we're at the beginning of that challenge phase, which lasts for 30 days. Once the challenges are submitted, the FCC and the CPUC will review the evidence provided by everyone during this process. This phase involves verifying the submitted data, cross-referencing it with existing info, and changing the maps. And after this review, the rebuttal phase will begin after those 2 weeks. And this will give eligible rebutters, which are those local governments, nonprofits, ISPs, and tribal nations, the opportunity to basically challenge the challenges with counter evidence. And then last is a final review and determination process, after which the final list of eligible locations is made and then go to the NTIA for final approval. But really just a key date to remember for now is that we're in the midst of the challenge process. It's a 30-day window that began on July 8th and will end on August 6th. Now we'll go over how to get involved. So first, and definitely the most important thing to do right now, is to review the FCC coverage maps if you haven't already. And this map shows the current broadband coverage as reported to the FCC. So if unchallenged, all areas that are currently listed as served, which you can see in gray, all these locations will determine where, served are in gray, blue are underserved, and pink are unserved. These will determine where BEAD funding will go. So for example, like if we're looking at Watsonville right here, this tiny cluster, or this large cluster over here only shows maybe like one pink unserved location and one blue underserved location. So if you have any evidence or knowledge about whether any of these is, say, an unserved location, or if there is a community anchor institution in this location, you could submit a challenge. You can also check out the challenge portal for downloadable data that you can use to support your challenge. And this data shows the current or the pre-challenge classification of all broadband serviceable locations by location ID, as well as a list of all community anchor institutions. And all of this evidence will be needed to submit a challenge. So checking out these resources ahead of time is definitely a necessary first step. The second step is registering for the challenge portal, which is very simple. It's only 2 sections and it takes about 2 minutes. Doing so will give you full access to the portal, which will allow you to not only submit and rebut challenges if you are one of those eligible entities, but also view evidence submitted by individuals, because like I mentioned, individuals cannot submit challenges. And if you are an individual, you will not register for the portal. Skip step 2. Instead, you'll submit evidence to the consumer challenge map, and I'll discuss this in detail in a few slides. And the final step is applying for a cost plus tier D or E fabric license. And while it's not technically required, it is very, very strongly recommended, as this license allows you to download fabric data, which is specific address and location data used to submit a challenge. And once you've got everything set up and you're ready to submit a challenge, it's important to note the minimum evidence required for submitting a challenge. The first is making sure that the address you're challenging is in fact a broadband serviceable location, which can be found in the Fabric dataset, which includes precise address info for locations eligible for funding, or sorry, for broadband service. A second requirement is that the service you're challenging must be listed on the national broadband map and meets the definition of a reliable broadband service. So this includes considerations of speed, latency, and availability. And another seemingly simple one is just making sure that the email address that you provide as a challenger is verifiable and reachable. This just makes sure that the FCC and CPUC can contact you if they need additional info. And when you're submitting a challenge, you'll need to do some two-step verification process with your email. So be sure that your email address is correct. And finally, it's just making sure that any images that you submit as evidence must be good enough quality. And this refers to an image that allows for optical character recognition. So just like the ability to interpret text in an image, which helps the team review and interpret your evidence most clearly. Like I said before, it's really important for us to encourage community participation in the BEAD challenge process. And here's a little bit more about how individuals can get involved. Like I said, they cannot submit a challenge, they can provide evidence for eligible challengers. So this evidence can look like speed tests to show the actual internet speeds being experienced at a given location. Evidence of service availability, like screenshots or documents showing lack of service, and any other evidence related to a provider's service quality. Through the challenge portal, eligible challengers can then review the evidence submitted by individuals and decide whether to submit a challenge based on that evidence. Once again, individuals cannot register to the portal, submit a challenge, or rebut challenges directly. They can only provide this kind of supporting evidence. And given the tight application window and the complexity of this process, it's really unlikely that any one single entity will be able to or even want to go through every single location and verify them on their own, which is why we encourage this kind of collective effort. So please spread awareness, encourage people in your communities to learn more about BEAD and understand its importance, and really urge your community members to test their internet speed and latency. And this data is just really critical for identifying truly unserved and underserved areas. And I will now toss it over to David.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So it is really important that we do this challenge process and that we try to get as many people involved as possible. The Federal Communications Commission is really focusing on crowdsourced information to go out and sort of get that ground truth that is necessary. They don't want to make any guesses about things. They don't want to make any presumptions. And so I think it's really important that we reach out to our communities and encourage people to get involved. In my mind, that would include things like, for example, if you're a city, a county, a town, you have a Facebook page, you have a next door page, you have a social media way to get out to your community, putting it on your website, maybe even in some ways communicating with your residents to let them know that we are in a challenge process window. There was something that came up actually yesterday, and unfortunately, because it was so recent, we didn't include it. But I did want to note that there is also now the Federal Communications has released an app for doing testing, and this is something that everyone can download. You can put it onto your phone, and you can run speed tests using it. So it's available on both the Google Play Store as well as the Apple App Store. You would search for FCC speed test, and I have it on my phone. You probably can't see it because of my background there. So, and then this allows you to run some tests. And in fact, tests can be run to submit challenges, so that this is, again, we're collecting data which ultimately gets rolled up into a challenge. And so letting your folks know about the website as well as the app, I think would be really useful. Excuse me for 1 second here. So the other thing that I think is important in this is that if you feel like, for example, you have community anchor institutions, and of course we encourage you to take a look at the data through the links that we've provided, figure out whether or not there are errors in that. The challenge that we're running right now really sets the basis for where the BEAD goes in the future. If we don't get challenges, then after the map is set, then the map is set. And then at that point, there will not be a process for going back and saying, well, hey, you said this address was served and it's not. Or likewise, hey, we have this community anchor institution that needs service and you missed it. Well, then they're going to say, well, the challenge process happened and sorry you didn't participate. So let's all work together to make sure that the Central Coast region is challenged properly. And we are available to you if you want to work with us at MBEP on figuring out how to do this. And so please contact us and we'll provide contact information at the end of the presentation. And so I'm just going to end by encouraging everybody to please use us as a resource for that, and we'd be happy to talk to you about this and to guide you through that process and to do work with you on submitting those challenges. I think at this point I don't have any more slides, so I'm just going to hand it. Oh, okay. So I don't know why. I should have said next slide. I thought I was controlling the screen, and apparently I wasn't. So yes, I've already said this. So it is important that we do this, and we have to make sure that these community anchor institutions are included because of course they are typically operating at kind of a tight margin in their operating budgets. Any money that we can save community anchor institutions on broadband will help let them divert those funds to things that actually serve the community. Next slide, please. And then I think we're in Q&A. So we'll hand it back to Maura to MC the Q&A part.
Thanks, David, and thanks for that great recap. Yeah, we can't emphasize enough that it is super, super important to get community input during this process, given the tight application window and capacity and all that. So yeah. Chat. Will a Spanish version of the flyer be available? Actually, I think it may be available. We have someone on our team that's already working on a Spanish translation of something else, Tammy, so I might be able to ask them to get that going for us. And thanks for distributing that flyer, Tammy.
Are there any other questions?
I do see a question.
I see a question in chat.
Yep. So let's watch the chat here. That said, yes, the recording will be made available, and we will share that out in the coming days.
And I see Philip has their hand raised. I'm gonna unmute you if you'd like. I also see.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Good morning and excellent presentation. Very clear and direct and useful. We used it effectively with our applications and our recently awarded grants. So it does work. And we urge people to, yes, join the bandwagon and spread the word and get input because that's important for our communities. I have a specific question about the uh, development of either a subcommittee or a work group to continue the development of update the planning procedures for our efforts using the local nonprofits and other organizations that represent the community in order to get information in and out and to develop ways and means to interact and effectively connect with their local, state, and federal entities that are involved in this. That took us a lot of time and effort, and there still leaves, I find, a lot to be desired. And I'd like to, in the near future, be part of a group of those interested to talk about it and to develop best practices, and so that we can effectively return to the group with suggestions of how to improve it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Philip. Do you regularly attend our bi-monthly stakeholder meetings?
Everything you send me, I try to attend.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, so in the future, I'm looking to have a portion of our bi-monthly stakeholder meetings have a section like that, so we can discuss our best practices and raise concerns in that kind of, group format. So we're having a meeting on August 29th. I'll email you and everyone here, obviously, more details on that, but it would be great if we could have you speak during that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. And then I see Tammy. Give me one moment.
Tammy, which organization are you from?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, so I am with a nonprofit in the San Lorenzo Valley in the Santa Cruz Mountains. We're called San Lorenzo Valley Emergency Network. However, actually, I have a question which is about another amazing nonprofit in our area, which is called the Highlands Park Senior Center. And I think that they might be considered a community anchor institution. I happened to check out the map, and they don't have a dot on the map. And I was myself trying to kind of walk through that process to figure out, how do you challenge when you don't have a spot on the map? Because if you don't have a spot on the map, there's no point in doing speed tests. It seems. Is this a case where we should, like, that organization should be reaching out to you guys for some assistance about how to properly make a challenge?
So it wouldn't need to be that particular institution or anchor institution that asks us to do that. Anyone can ask or submit that evidence on their behalf.
Okay.
But I know that I haven't responded to your email yet, Tracy or Tammy. I know that we have a meeting scheduled coming up soon, so I would love to chat about that more in detail then, about how we can get that. You said it was a retirement home or a retirement community?
No, it's called, the name of it is called Highlands Park Senior Center. They do a lot of services for the community, primarily, elder part of the community. They also have some medical services there, etc. They're a great anchor for the whole community, really. And I just love them. And I found that with their location not even being on the map, and then I was confused and frustrated looking through the challenge process to understand how a challenge goes about being made. I know that you're saying it's possible to do that, and just asking what's the most effective way to get help to be able to start that challenge process. So we can take that offline, but I was just hearing that maybe contacting you folks might be a great way to get some help. And then I just have one more question, which is, so if on the map locations are indicated as served and those are not challenged, it sounds like what we're saying is that then there is no need to allocate BEAD funding. And if there's no need to allocate BEAD funding, then how does an entire place like the San Lorenzo Valley, which is super challenged by the communications infrastructure that exists and everything about last mile projects and funding sounds really fantastic. Does that cut us off from being able to see future infrastructure builds? Or are infrastructure builds still possible just without BEAD funding?
Yeah, so many of these projects are based on served and underserved areas, which are determined by these coverage maps. So I would say, in short, maybe yes. David, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So to your point, for BEAD's purposes, this will be the map. So if for example, a location in San Lorenzo Valley is indicated as served, it is not challenged, BEAD comes, then that address is not eligible to be served by BEAD. So it's critical that the addresses be challenged. Knowing the ins and outs of the individual locations is really a question for locals. And that's why the FCC is focusing heavily on this sort of ground truth approach and crowdsourcing that information. That being said, going forward, it may be that that address can be served by another program. What maps will be used for that program? Will there be another challenge process prior to that is a question. I strongly encourage everyone to understand that the amount of money that is being spent on broadband through the IIJA, the Infrastructure Innovation Jobs Act, is a generational opportunity. And I've been saying this for a very long time, that the amount of money that's being spent is likely to be the biggest amount of money we will see for broadband, at least in my lifetime. And so we have to get it right, because there will be money coming down the road, but it won't be to the level that we have right now. This is our best opportunity to get significant change into the communities. And so that's why this challenge process is so important, and that's why BEAD is so important. So I would encourage everybody to reach out. Our contact info has been placed in the chat. I believe the last slide of this presentation also contains our contact info, and that will provide you with a resource to reach out to us and ask us for assistance in submitting a challenge or understanding how to navigate the system in order to submit a challenge.
Thanks for your answer. Can I ask really quickly one more question? I noticed that our local fire stations are not on the maps. They're indicated that they're not locations where there would be consumer broadband internet used. Like, that's what the map says. And I'm shocked by that. I would think that fire stations, of course, they have their own many communication means, but just basic internet should be one of them too. I'm curious if you have a comment.
Yeah, I know, for example, the Felton Fire Station, I remember that was something that was mentioned in another context while I was there for a meeting, and they said that the fire station didn't have broadband right there at the intersection of Graham Hill and 9. And so,
right.
Yeah, and so that is something that I think we want to challenge. So I would encourage you to be liberal in filing your challenges, because there's no harm in challenging something. And if it becomes rebuttable, then at least you tried. But if it doesn't get challenged, then the answer is definitely, okay, that address is not going to be served. So put your senior centers in there, put your daycare centers in there, put your schools and your all of your community anchor institutions in, and make sure that those are there. And involve your communities in doing this, because everyone's got their own thing that they love, their senior center, their fire station, their ham radio shack, or whatever it is that they feel is important for the community. And those things all need to be challenged if they are not already there on the map. So it's not like we have you only have 6 challenges and you can't, you have to pick and choose. Feel free to file hundreds of challenges. If you feel like there are hundreds of mistakes, then you should totally do that. Tracy or Tammy, did that answer your question?
Thank you very much.
Great, of course. Yeah, and I see Mohammed from City of PG. Same, like let's make sure that all of these locations, City Hall, are challenged. And definitely download the app. That's a good way for you to do mobile connectivity challenges, like for your cell coverage. That I think is going to be important as well, because if an area is claimed to be covered by cell and is not, you definitely want to let the FCC know that is an area that is not served by cellular. And you can download that app for free and run tests and contribute that information just via your phone.
I just saw Annie's question in the chat, and they asked, what does training look like in terms of the end goal of the BEAD program? Would this training be focused on residents who seek broadband service? I'm assuming this refers to when I mentioned that one of the objectives of the BEAD program is to also promote programs or support programs that'll advance adoption. And so these will look like digital literacy training courses or digital literacy training programs. So these are programs that basically help users understand how to use their internet service. And I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with one of our local organizations, Loaves, Fishes, and Computers. But they're a great community resource hub, and they host digital literacy training courses for English as a second language individuals, low-income individuals, and also older users as well. So these courses can look like understanding how to maybe create a resume and apply for jobs online, or for others, it can also be something like understanding how to boot up a computer and access their email and communicate with loved ones. So that's what I was referring to. It won't be training related to anything else.
I've placed a link to Loaves, Fishes, and Computers into the chat if you want to reach out to them. And we do talk to them on a pretty regular basis and have some programs of interaction with them. And to Maura's point, their focus, so there are 3 things that go into digital equity: access, meaning do I have a connection, accessibility, and affordability. And so they work on the access question. Do you have a device? It's one thing to have connectivity, but if you don't have a device and you don't know how to use it, there's no point in having the connectivity.
Thanks for saying that, David. That is a perfect plug for a report that I just wrote. I'm going to
You did an awesome job on.
Thank you. I'm going to shamelessly plug that right here. This slide just has links to all of our MBEP policy papers, and I released one just last week, and it basically emphasizes what David just said, which is that affordability and infrastructure are both critical pillars of digital inclusion efforts. It really just came from when I first joined on and got into the broadband space, I noticed that there was so much funding, as we talked about with all these other programs for infrastructure projects. And it seemed that like affordability, especially with the Affordable Connectivity Program, affordability efforts were just kind of overlooked. And I used some ACP data and FCC broadband coverage data to show that these two facets are inextricably linked and are both so important for adoption efforts, because like David said, you can build all this infrastructure, but if no one's using it, all this investment will be wasted. So check it out if you'd like. Any more questions? Doesn't look like we do have any, but I just like to thank everyone for joining in today and listening to us yap on for a while about broadband, which we love to do. All of these slides will be posted, and sorry, not posted, but we'll email them out to everyone who attended, and we'll also have a recording for that as well. So yeah, thank you, everyone. David, did you have any last comments?
No, just if you'd put up the contact slide and
Oh, yeah, one more time. Here is our contact slide, and all of our links will be in the PowerPoint that you can reference to. They're all hyperlinks.
right. And Tammy put a comment in chat that I just wanted to close by addressing, which is we agree. This challenge process sort of was like, boom, okay, we're hitting challenge process. We didn't get a lot of advance notice about it. And we've been responding to it as well as you are now responding to it. So I feel your pain. We're doing the best that we can to address it in that context. And thank you for the kind comment, Tammy. Appreciate it.
Right, I will stop recording now. Thank you, everyone.